right now. There we go. But I am Tim Green, editor of Rattle magazine, and we're here with two poets from our spring issue, Roberta Beery and Richard Gilbert. And are they here?
Yes.
Greetings.
All right, so we have
Hello.
Roberta Beery and Richard Gilbert. We're going to do 20 minutes of reading each. There we go. There's Roberta. We're going to do 20 minutes of reading each, and we're going to have a Q&A. We have a new URL, so find us on Twitter or Facebook or the Google Plus events page to load your questions up. It's a little different because of this technical problem we had. But we're ready to go now, so I'm looking forward to it. First up is Roberta Beery. Roberta is the Haiku editor of Modern Haiku. She tweets her photo haiku at short poems. Her book, The Unworn Necklace, was awarded the William Carlos Williams Award by the Poetry Society of America in 2007. It's a great book. I have a copy. I'm a very proud owner of a copy of that book. Her most recent book is Deflection, which is a collection of haibun and haiku sequences. She's a frequent haiku contest judge and presents workshops worldwide on the art of haiku. So here she is, Roberta Beery.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks, Robert, for inviting me. And Richard, it's always a pleasure, and nice to see everybody. The first haibun that I'm going to read is called On the F Train. Reading that copy of Howl you gave me years ago. On some birthday, a tote bag filled with all the poetry books it could hold. And when you left me, all the books a little worse for wear, but the tote bag still intact. Old subway car. The cane seats, broken weave. So that's a haibun prose poem with a haiku at the end. The second one's called Lipstick, and it's for the people such as myself, daughters of beautiful mothers. Lipstick. Pity the daughters of beautiful mothers, the years spent waiting to grow into a beauty that never comes. The sympathetic looks finally understood at the moment when childhood ends. Mother's visit. Side by side, we outline our lips. This next piece may or may not be a list poem. I'm not quite sure. It's called Journal Entry, January 1. Number 1, practice patience. In Italian, it's pazienza. Number 2, relearn Italian. Number 3, find in the house, check attic, closets, and basement, all 3 editions of OG in Italia, including A, half-finished workbooks, and B, cassette tapes. Note to self, does anyone listen to cassette tapes besides me? 4, who am I kidding? Note to self, you know it is whom am I kidding? Don't get off topic. 5, this is too hard, throw everything out. Textbooks, all 3 editions. Workbooks, whether or not finished. Cassette tapes, really do this, do not put anything back. Use outside garbage cans, not inside one. 6, find top 3 online Italian classes. 7, read all course reviews by real people only. 8, compare course prices. 9, put all info on spreadsheet. If needed, ask for help. 10, practice patience. First light, a paper rose unfolds the new year. These are all from my book Deflection, Accents Publishing, just issued it. I wanted to thank Katerina Klemmer, the publisher and editor. She did a great job, and my brother Kevin did the painting. Kevin's an artist who lives in Italy. Lucky Kevin. This next poem is for my son. I hope he's listening. Before the outing. My son's boyfriend. 3 words I practice saying, alone, in my room. Rainbow flag. Father pretends not to see. Not something that's contagious, still you step back from my son and his boyfriend. Rainbow flag. Mother tiptoes around the subject. With knife in hand, my son's lover dissects the last white peach. Before the outing is a haiku sequence, so that's something I like to do every so often. The haiku can be individual or can be linked, and that was an example of a linked haiku. This next haibun might resonate with a few people. My background is part Irish, and the haibun title is called Irish Twins. We share an attic room. In the corner is an old double bed. It smells and sags on one side, my side. Late at night, I hear my heartbeat loud, so loud he will hear it. He will think my heart is calling him up the attic stairs. His footsteps are heavy. He smells of allspice and cherry tobacco. My eyes shut tight. I know he is here. I feel his weight, never on my side, always on the side she sleeps. When the bed springs sing their sad song, I fly away, up to the ceiling. My sister is already there. Together we hold hands. Looking down, we see our bodies. We are not moving. We are as still as the dead. Attic rain, the backyard swing, off kilter. For the past several years, I've taken care of my mom with the help of my kids and my husband. It's been a hard road, and it's a road that's a long journey, but it's now ended. This next haibun, called Dementia, Mild to Moderate, is something that I learned about. My mother hugs me hard and tells me I am beautiful. She says, I love you, in a voice that anyone can hear. She blows kisses my way. We hold hands and she turns her head and smiles at me. When I get up to leave, she asks me to stay for dinner. She grins and says there's a man she wants me to meet, someone who adores her. I demur and say I have to leave. She laughs, then says, I won't hold it against you. In my life, I have never known her to be cheerful. I've never seen her engage in banter or dish out compliments. I don't know this woman. I want my mother back. Long after, the frailty of silk roses. Another sequence, Summertime Blues. Suddenly single, a carpenter bee gives me the wrong kind of buzz. Midday haze after the tune-up, still out of tune. Overripe, no one to mow my lawn. 4th of July, the couple's all ginned up. Finality defined all the dog day afternoon. Can't shake it off. Heat lightning. Now I'd like to read some haiku. They are very, very hard to write, but if you write them, you'll know what I'm talking about. Nothing left to say. An empty nest fills with snow. Piano practice in the room above me, my father shouting. Talk of war, the spin cycle's steady hum. Snowbound, reading out loud to an empty room. I actually do that quite a bit. Hunger moon, the words I meant to say. Winter dusk, when Dad would phone. Rainy season, again he tells me she means nothing. This one's for my husband. Talking in bed, I forget his name. Second husband. Rambling phone call. I count the drinks in her voice. Thunder, the roses shift into shadow. And this one's for my mom. In the seconds after death, warm hands. I do have another poem about my mom. This one was written shortly after her death. It was a very, very beautiful death, and I was privileged to be there. Nighthawks. Tonight her breathing's more shallow. I tried to find her favorite song, searched quickly on my iPad. Mac the Knife by Bobby, replays of Vera's We'll Meet Again. But mostly I just talk, and she listens, eyes glued shut in coma land. Well past morning, I kiss her rice paper face, stroke her white hair. A voice is crying, calling, Mama, Mama, a word back from the dead, executed in the land of assimilation. Just after noon, Mama curls in fetal position. I keep watch, rise and fall of out-of-breath beats. Too soon it comes, ebb tide. Autumn coolness enters a hand long held in mine. Now I'd like to read some haiku from The Unworn Necklace. I hope these resonate with some of you. Thank you all for listening also. Waiting room. The ex-wife looks past me. Ice patch, the surprising strength of mother's grip. First date, the little pile of anchovies. Break up, my daughter's voice cracks across 2 continents. Blackout. My son speaks a secret I always knew. Talking divorce. He pours his coffee, then mine. Heat wave. Waiting for him to tell me what I already know. Cherry blossoms, the tug, tug, tug of baby's hand. Halloween twilight again this year, my son waits alone by the door. My son and I counting fireflies, counting stars. And I'd really like to show everybody this issue of Rattle, the Japanese forms. Issue number 47. I'm so privileged to be in this wonderful journal. Tim Green, editor. Genetics. Your eyes are big and round, like your father's, but while his are the color of the Irish Sea, yours are the color of muddy fields. The muddy fields on my father's land fit only for the peasants who work them. Abortion day, a shadow flutters the fish tank. A lot of my poems are thought to be autobiographical. They're actually not autobiographical. They're telling the truth, but telling it slant autobiographical. I'd like to say that for people who are writing haiku and coming from mainstream poetry, it's a really good idea to read some haiku in journals such as Modern Haiku or the Rattle 47 issue, and to get a feel of what haiku can be when they're done well. I can say that because I don't have any haiku in the Rattle issue. I have 2 haibun. It's over, slicing his shirt for the rag bag. I highly recommend doing something like that. His death notice, the get well card still in my briefcase. Early spring walk, your hand in my pocket. And finally, I'd like to read another haibun, The Offer. Squirrels in the attic. As soon as I walk in the door, I hear them inside the walls, screeching a code I can't break. Right on cue, he asks me to move back. If I do, he'll call someone about the squirrels. I promise, he says. His eyes get watery like he's trying not to cry. Coffee percolating away the rest of my life. He says he's old, He no longer can take care of himself. I take a good look. He needs a shave. He needs a haircut. He needs a wash. This man who used to scare me to death. The squirrels get louder. Quick, he says, his heavy cane raised. Bang, bang, bang. So loud a crack forms on the ceiling. God damn you to hell, he says. Look what you made me do. I need to get something, I say, in my car. Rear mirror, the stunted pines, red robin. It was the squirrels, calls a voice from the doorway. Come back. It wasn't you. Come back inside, says the voice. Come back. Well, thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Roberta. That was a great, great reading. I really can't wait to rewatch it. I've been tweeting out links and trying to get people tuned back into the new address. If anybody has any questions, you can tweet them at the hashtag TSPoetry, or you can post them on our events page here. And we're going to give 2 copies of this issue starring Roberta and Richard Gilbert to the best 2 questions. So tune in with your questions, and thanks so much, Roberta. I just love your poetry. Some of my favorite.
Thanks, Tim.
Let's see, and next up we have Richard Gilbert, who is the featured interviewee in this issue number 47, which I should say is the best-selling issue of Rattle we've ever had. And a lot of people cite Richard's interview as the highlight of the issue. There's so much to learn in this. I think it's a 30-page interview. So check it out and ask your questions to win a free copy. Now, Richard Gilbert's coming to us from Japan. I think with a delayed start, it's about almost 1 o'clock in the morning there. So sorry about that, Richard. But Richard moved to Kumamoto, Japan in 1997. He's associate professor of British and American literature at Kumamoto University. He's co-judge of the Kusamakura International Haiku Competition, founder and director of the Kannichi Haiku Translation Group, and founding associate member of the Haiku Foundation. His book, Poems of Consciousness and Contemporary Japanese English Language Haiku in Cross-Cultural Perspectives, was awarded the HSA Mildred Canterman Award for Haiku Criticism and Theory. He's got a great website at gendaihaiku.com, which we'll link on the program notes. So here he is, Richard Gilbert.
Good evening or good morning. I hope everyone can see me. I'd like to first thank you, Tim, and also Robert, for allowing this all to happen. I was really moved by Roberta's reading. I haven't actually seen Roberta as a real person, I think, in some years. I'm an expat in Japan. I'm here most of the time. Can you all hear me? I hope so. I'm not really known as a poet or as a haiku poet, primarily more as a critic. But I've been publishing haiku in the various journals for about 12 years, and I'm hoping to put out a collection of my own work. I have about 80 haikus, so I'm pretty slow. And what I've decided to do today is somewhat similar to the reading I did for Rattle. I was in Los Angeles a few weeks ago. I was able to go to the Rattle's public reading, the Flint Ridge Bookstore in LA, or near LA. And I think that one of the maybe problems or difficulties that I face in reading haiku is that, you know, when you read more than 5 or 6, they're non-narrative, or at least almost anti-narrative, very brief, and they tend not to link together very well and get kind of boring. So I've been linking them with some prose. I wouldn't call it a haibun or a story, but I'm just going to continue on here with 8 sections of about 10 haiku with some verbiage that I've thrown in. The first series I call Autobiography. And you wonder, who is it in life that might breathe a word, the salmon in the sky, a mouse escaped from sound. Why I had to run there in the trees to begin with, just before and just after love. The blood, the horse I was left to the woods. So, yeah, I'm not announcing the haiku, but there was two right there. I'll just continue. At the edge of a lake or river, on a dock or wharf, sunlight scintillates into murky green depths. The shock of cold, always with expectation. The truth of an imminent future. This is the body speaking. I jump. As in and you, and you, and you, alone in the sea. As a rock or a spacey kid. Where I grew up were a few scattered petroglyphs etched into granite found among soundless pathways of pine. Returning bones, a stone unwinds in the breeze. The attraction to darkness, not unlike velvet when slipping between. Waning gibbous, the increasing density of fall. Matter and form. As a poet, some doubt concerning place and existence. On the shores of great silence, father's eyes. Not improved by my father's disposition, did he ever truly remember himself? I listened for the memories of my ancestors, unable to find the cry of the next door boy, spring rain. We all know we're dying. It's not too bad. Cause for a party, do you imagine? Under a Fellini moon. Blood orange, the curving radius of sunset. Or the sudden sliver of noon. Old movies bound by love, yet unbound, without searching can there be rest? They now seem so slow, those scenes. Is there yet time to be fixed? I don't think so. After the rush, the hollow sound of the holy. That's a little sequence or group of linked haiku with some prose called autobiography, which is supposed to put me in some kind of mood of finding myself, which haiku seem to oddly both bring me to myself but also create a lot of mystery as to their interpretation, even from myself as an author of them. So they just sort of hang there in space, which I really kind of love, that disappearance and appearance, that alternation and that indeterminacy. I'm going to go now to this second section called mixing. And in this section, there's actually 7 parts to it of 10 haiku each. But what I've decided to do is I wanted to try to represent haiku community in the world. I think one of the wonderful things I found about exploring the genre is that so many different people from various regions and countries write haiku. I'm one of the judges of the Kusumakura Haiku contest in Kumamoto here in Japan, and we get like 900 or so submissions every year from over 60 countries. And for some reason, this really short form seems to attract people to join together in small communities, not just in Japan. And in order to create this feeling tonight, I wanted to take some of my own haiku, but also mix them with haiku from this book. This is a book that came out just last year, Haiku 2014, edited by Lee Gerga and Scott Metz. Now they have another book I don't have in front of me, which is Haiku 21, which came out in 2011, which has quite a larger number. But this book, Haiku 2014, has 100 haiku from 100 poets, all published in 2013. And I'm going to read my own haiku mixing with haiku from that small volume, and I will announce the names of the poets that I'm reading right after the haiku. So let me start. and see how this goes. So this is all kind of a just experimental one-off idea. And as you know, recently Leonard Nimoy passed away, and I received a letter from a haiku friend who, what did she say? She said another celebrity had died, and she hadn't shed a tear, but when she heard Leonard Nimoy had died, she cried. And it really brought up some feelings for me to also made me think about the importance of Star Trek. Anyway, here we go. We'll start with the first section. Space, the final frontier. Thank you, Leonard Nimoy. Love code, the ultrasound of your photons. Solitude, round the frequency of stars. So greenly history puts forth thorns. Eve Luckring. At 7 we are replicants. Helen Buckingham. Deep in woods, all the dancing in space. Stars in the natural night, one song threads another. Born of a flower of space one can touch, can read about now. Along the slice of water and sky, never at night. Night, the side of earth the noun is on. Gary Hotham. Moon cradled, you recall the voice of another. I might be the distance. 2. I dwell in possibility, a fairer house than prose. Emily Dickinson. Thank you, Mom. Eventually, depth penetrating desires un. Spring dawn, I put on my gender. David Lanoux, actually. Running forever, spring after tragedy. If only a lie, hours of a parking lot. Solitude, sardines on toast. Robert Davey. Mass, solitude, what's left of the party, denial. Lettuce your grandmother's car. Jim Westenhaver. Just please, how to forgive. Spring rain. Michelle Tennyson. Something of a scar left. Sorry, let me read that again. Something of a scar of ocean left. Rolling cigarettes. Flown, her grainy image resolves from surveillance. 3. And from which enveloping and permeating mystery, consciousness never completely separates. Thank you, Buckminster Fuller. Broken hole, worth a world destoned. 3 oceans exported into orbit in a small cocoon. Flower of space one can touch about moss. Not from here. How nothing is. John Martone. Exist, resist, exits. I am, you are, he is. Jellyfish. Kate S. Godsey. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no virgin, no mind. Bomb nor embody to take blue sky. Mark Harris. Flash mob daffodils. Alan S. Bridges. Casually rewriting a frog. 4. We have a secret. We are alive. Thank you, HD. When you dream the inside, smoke between cypress trees. Another bird dream, probing the tenderness under a wing. Melissa Allen. Samantha, reminding myself, form is emptiness. Unfamiliar alphabet cleaning the talons of winter. Sherry Hunter Day. The girl brief, image and truth. Why and why not? About it. Cold knife swimming into blue bones. Susan Constable. A drowning man pulled into violet worlds, grasping hydrangea. Decisively parting her parenthesis. Jeffrey Winke. Dedicated to the moon, I rise without a decent alibi. Semite war, unharmed olives, the desert tastes your skin. 5. We travel, some of us, forever. Thank you, Anais Nin. Awaiting the warm that everyone. What became deeper of you I let in. You whisper, just your sometimes, Brendan Slater. Then nude, normal silence between fears. Forged into the familiar dying peripheral. Susan Diradoni. Moon resins, sex and God and teeth and fingernails. With you, the world, I feel there's more. Fuck it. Roses in the rose, messaged and left. Licking the cleft, sweet aspirin after rain. Everything you think I think is true. 6. The soul is that which deepens. Thank you, James Hillman. Only so long, for so long, only for more. Rock, paper, scissors, ocean. Sabine Miller. Time, fuck, shit, piss, blue, mine, love, men, leaf, must call. After the rain, where perfect was holy. Sarah Rayfelt. As a body born of words, as a body bones of words, preoccupations, she writes. Columbine, by any other name, David Caruso. Nagasaki, in her belly, the sound of an open mail, Don Baird. Unabsolved ululation, uncalculated underscore, unwept, unchurch, ultra pure. Our yesterday, behind the blinds. Midnight Mockingbird, Allen Ginsberg in my bed, Cathabella Wilson. 7. Thank you, Allen Ginsberg, for your American sentences, that the thine that becomes the subject of one stroke know as if. Sheeting rain, voices softer as I well. A blue coffin, one nail escapes the solar system, Peter Yovu. Nothing rhymes with it, Agent Orange, Christina Nguyen. Isms with our clothes on, Paul Pfluger Jr. Hungover, ignoble, Jerusalem, cactus, pissing the cats. This morning, it takes the iris to open forever. Michelle Root Bernstein. Be mine, alive for one more war. It must be how violence in the world, crocus. Unchangeability, I leave the earth that way. Thank you. Well, all finished. There's my reading. Somebody help me.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. That was great.
Sure.
Now we're moving on to our question and answer phase. I think this is a reading where people should watch again and again, because those haiku that you love are so intricate and take so much thought. And once you access them, they're really, really magical. Let's see. We have some questions here, and if anybody has questions, just tweet them to TA Poetry. So hashtag TA Poetry. Ask your questions for either Roberta or Richard. And we had some great questions. I'm going to start off with one for Roberta. We had some great questions from Alan Summers, who I think lives in England. To Roberta, he asks, could you explain a little about your process of incorporating an extremely difficult and painful time into such a well-expressed microverse as haiku in regards to the Unworn Necklace? He talks about it being a paraverse novel, and how do you get such intensely autobiographical work into a work of art when life isn't linear like that?
Well, Alan, I actually met Alan in Bath, England, and had a very, very wonderful reading that he organized, Alan Summers. And the Unworn Necklace, Snapshot Press, it won the first prize I think it was 2006 or 7. And they do a contest for haiku manuscripts. I think that's about the only one. So for you haiku people out there, if you want to get your book published, Snapshot Press is the way to go. Enter their contest. I had many poems about a hard time in my life, which was my divorce, the end of my life as I knew it, single parenting, 2 small children for a number of years. And I kind of coincided with my discovery of haiku as a modern form. I had lived in Japan for 5 years with my then husband, and when I came home, it was basically just me and my 2 kids. So I joined a local haiku group here. I had found one in Japan, and the group is called Towpath. It's still going strong after almost 20 years. And the process of writing down my feelings, it's not so easy to do and make it work as haiku. All I can say is that you have to be willing to take risks in your writing. You have to be willing to expose yourself, and you have to be not shy about getting critical comments from people who find that kind of poetry anathema to them. So you have to be strong as a writer to make this subject matter something that's accessible. These kinds of things about one's trials, one's personal trials, and the Unworn Necklace. It is about loss, but it's also about redemption and overcoming. And to use a very overused American phrase, it's about happy endings. I think that I did get a lot of help from people. One thing in poetry, haiku is very, very welcoming. It's a global kind of poetry, and I just reached out to people. So I had actually putting the manuscript together was not an easy thing, but I did want to accomplish this mainly because some people said that I couldn't do it. So that inspired me. Some people have been told that haiku is just a 5-7-5 form and it has to have a nature aspect. But if you read the Unworn Necklace, you'll see that's not true. And you also can see that by the poems that Rich Gilbert just read, which were amazing. I hope that answers your question, Alan.
Well, thanks, Roberta. That was great. I think it does answer the question really wonderfully. And now next up, a question for Richard, also from Alan Summers. He asks, could you sum up how disjunctive techniques work in haiku work? And he says, they're like Marmite even to haiku writers, but I found reading your groundbreaking book over a few years provided much needed breakthrough in my poetry. And he thanks you for that. So do you have anything to say about disjunctive techniques, Richard?
Did you just say Marmites?
That's what he said. He said it's Marmite.
I think I might be having a cultural gap moment about Marmite, but anyway.
So Marmite is a
you.
highly
Yes.
divisive topic in the UK, is what he means there.
It's
you love it or you hate it. So there you go.
it's something you spread on toast.
Something you spread on toast that people either love and can't get enough of, or absolutely hate and can't understand how anyone would ever eat. So
Robert,
this
reference is a key to the question.
It is, in fact. Welcome to the transatlantic world. So there you go.
So, but it seems that in that case, he's maybe suggesting that this idea of somehow disjunction or the techniques of disjunction in haiku form are perhaps divisive in some way, or that he's asking me maybe to address that, or I'm projecting. And I think if that's true, if what he's saying is true about Marmite, it's certainly true about disjunction in haiku. Absolutely. Yeah, I introduced that term about 2004. Now it's about 11, 12 years ago in an essay, and I was in that essay I was really frustrated with this idea that I think maybe a lot of listeners like myself felt some years ago, that we were taught that haiku has to be in 5-7-5 English syllables, and it has to have two images that somehow juxtapose in some way. And I think that if you've heard the haiku that Roberta read and I read tonight, for instance, you'll find that there's this quite a variety of language use, maybe what you might think of as language poetics, and different kinds of techniques of stylism to using language in different ways that don't actually have a haiku composition that uses two images at all. So disjunction was introduced as a modern poetics technique, which has to do with how our consciousness as readers is working with the haiku, and how worlds or possible worlds are created in mind. And the idea of, you could say, image or conceptual overlay, or what I call impossibility or paradox in haiku, is really important. And it really stems from Basho. It's really quite an old idea that he discussed, or was written down. So this is also happening in Japan, the modern haiku movement, which is really from usually the 1920s on. Also has applied these kinds of techniques and ideas. So it's not completely just my own idiosyncratic thought. That said, without looking at translations and looking at what's happening maybe at some level of excellence in the field, I think there's, I don't want to say there's a professional like coterie, but certainly in right now, like online, there's ILET, IS/LET, that Scott Metz is the editor of. There's Bones Haiku Journal online, for instance, that I like. Moon Garlic Haiku Journal online. Just Noon Journal online by Philip Rowland's doing that, editing that. And there's other places where you can look at maybe more innovative or so-called 21st century styles. I also mentioned right at the beginning of my reading this little book, but Haiku 21, which is a much larger anthology, presents haiku published from 2000 to 2011 that are kind of using these new techniques and styles. So I think the proof is in the pudding. When you go to the poetry, see if you like it, if it turns you on, if it moves you in some way, and maybe you'll be surprised at how it's working and how language is working in the form. I'm long-winded about this, but I'll just say one more thing, which is that I'm one of the translators of modern Japanese haiku into English. And one thing that I really appreciate about the Japanese tradition is the complexity of the language, the four alphabets, and the history of season words, for instance. We don't have that in English. So you could say that the English language presents a kind of weakness in some way in relation to the Japanese tradition. And that's actually true. I mean, there are some things that can happen in Japanese absolutely can't happen in English. But then the next question is, well, then what is the power, the poetic power of English language in regards to haiku, and how can we find that power? And is it possible then to develop an excellent poetics using English or another, say, Indo-European language or non-Japanese language in haiku? And that's still an open question, but I feel that some of the anthologies that have come out and the poems that have been read by this evening and in other places, hopefully will present haiku as a new genre that's worth your attention. Thanks. That's about all I have to say about it.
Well, thanks, Richard. I think that was a great answer, and I could just listen to Richard talk about haiku all day. I love it. Now I'm going to combine two questions kind of into one. I'm going to ask Roberta this because I kind of already know. If you read our interview in the issue, you already know sort of where Richard stands and how he explains it. But I'm wondering what Roberta has to say. Daniel A. Nichols on Twitter asks, he says that he noticed that what haiku has some debate. Are there still any distinguishing formal traits, particularly in English? And then at the same time, we had a question from David J. Bauman on YouTube. He says he was put off writing haiku about personal things years ago by a teacher who insisted that one of the chief requirements of the form was that it be impersonal and directly related to the natural world. So the teacher said that he should write senryu and other short forms and that were not about nature and not write haiku. So this is the whole the whole 575, the whole haiku has a lot more variation than what we're taught in grade school. So what do you have to say about that, Roberta?
Well, the thing is that it's a very controversial subject for some people. Usually academics get involved. They like to follow the 575, but it's not only academics, it's also people like Billy Collins. I have his book, his haiku book, and published by Modern Haiku Press. She was just 17, it's called, and all those haiku are 575. I think that what you're taught in school is not very relevant to today's global haiku movement. I don't believe that you need a nature word. I don't believe in 575. I think the most important thing is to have the poem, when it's done, the haiku, should resonate. There should be an emotional connection, and that it should be something that you close your eyes when you hear the haiku read. You close your eyes and you can see that image or the juxtaposition of two images. There's been a lot of damage done by teachers in elementary school and maybe high school and middle school as well, where they follow very, I guess, 20th century, mid-20th century, early 20th century ideas about haiku in English. So I would tell people to disregard that and read the current journals, read Haiku in English, the first 100 years. That's a Norton anthology that just came out recently within the last year or so. That's a very, very good anthology, and I recommend that one. So I think on the idea that you were taught not to write about your personal stuff, that says more about the person who told you that. I think David asked that. It's kind of like when you're getting divorced and people tell you take your kids and move far away, never see the other spouse. That's kind of a good bet that's what they did, and they're looking for validation. That's what I think when I hear this kind of thing about, you can't be in the poem, and has to be distant, the I cannot be in haiku, and this kind of thing. You can find a million rules, but my advice is just to disregard them and keep reading good haiku, and you'll find your way. So.
Well, thanks, Roberta. I think that clears up a lot for a lot of people. It's
Can,
interesting.
Tim?
Oh, you want to add more?
Yeah, I mean, just to embellish on what Roberta said, I think she was really quite eloquent on the matter. Let's see. There has to be some sort of rule, or even at some extreme formula or delimitation that must define haiku as opposed to, say, an open form of poetry. And so there has, this was done historically in a very sort of purist, and some would say really extreme way, as being a 575 form of images or whatever. So there's still an open question as to what the form is, but I think the poets have been demonstrating that. So it is important, I think, to look at the poems. And I'd like to choose two right now and just quickly mention them. Here's one by Sabine Miller, Rock, Paper, Scissors, Ocean. So it's a very simple poem. What makes it haiku? And clearly you'd say rock, paper, scissors is, ocean is the unexpected word. The question here would be, does that deepen you? Where does that bring you? Does it feel like a poem? Does it slow your mind down or stop you in some way? Now for me, it does. But maybe it takes some practice at the brevity of the genre. Another poem here is by Sarah Rayfelt, After the Rain, Where Perfect Was Holy. What is the meaning there? How can you determine one interpretation? And again, does the language cause you to cause a space to open out? Those are things that are important to me in reading haiku and talking about the sort of more technical matters. But I think there's a feeling that makes the genre worth investigating. That's all. Without really defining it. I think it's quite hard to define those two poems as haiku or non-haiku, actually, myself. But I connote them that way.
Okay, well,
That's
thanks,
it.
Richard. No, those were great haiku. I just thought, Billy Collins is actually in this issue, and since he was brought up, he explains in the notes in the back why he prefers the 17-syllable version. So I thought maybe everybody might want to hear what he had to say. He says, I follow the 17-syllable limit because it provides me with a pleasurable feeling of pushback, a resistance to whatever literary whims I may have at the time. If you want to create a little flash of illumination, the haiku tells us, start by counting on your fingers. A 3-line poem with a frog is not necessarily a haiku. So that's what Billy Collins had to say on this subject. It kind of sounds like, he's open-minded in that he doesn't think it's necessary, but he personally prefers it, I think I would say. Let's see, one more question. Are you still there, Richard?
Sure.
This is for you.
I just say about Billy Collins. That's a really good example. He provides an example of his. It's like a précis. It's his approach to the genre, And one of the nice things about the genre, certainly from being in Japan, where they say there's like some millions of people practicing the form, that there's a lot of diversity. So I think that was one of the issues that had happened earlier on, at least in the North American tradition, was that there were a certain very small number of editors of a very few journals who really said, this is what haiku is, and if you're not doing this, it's not haiku, and we really dislike you even like mentioning that there would be another way of writing and calling it haiku. And that period of time seems to now be ended and over. That the idea of more that there are other ways of defining the form, and that's another longer topic of discussion. But I think it was in just the most recent copy of Modern Haiku Journal, Lee Gurga, I think, quoted, he has an essay in there, and he quoted Haruo Shirane's Beyond the Haiku Moment essays from 2000, in which he gives another kind of definition of haiku, which is really open. Doesn't involve syllable counting or even nature imagery. And it's actually really close to a modern haiku definition that's Japanese. I wish I had it here to read to you, but it's something we could post or link to later.
Okay, great. Yeah, we can put it in the notes at the bottom of the YouTube video. Okay, one more question. I'm going to ask actually both of you, kind of with a twist on it. But this is from Sandy Lyles from Texas. She asked for Richard, which female Gendai poets do you recommend and admire? And I'm going to ask Roberta too. First Richard, but then Roberta. Who are your favorite female poets? One of the strange things in the issue when it came out is that it was very male-dominated, which was not intentional. We don't count gender while we're choosing poems, and so I'd just love a shout out to more female haiku poets. I think we have in this issue we have I can't remember the numbers, but I think it's 24 poets and maybe only 6 are women or something like that.
Well, I remember you and I did the math, Tim, and it came out to be 20%.
Yeah. So, and that's not usual for our issues. Usually what we do at Rattle is just read and publish everything we like and don't really think about anything. And so the fact that it came out that way was a little scary. So I wonder if anybody have any thoughts on that, and if we could just get some shout-outs to some great female Gendai poets.
Who's starting? Can I throw in one comment quickly? Sure. When I did my book that was published in 2013, The Disjunctive Dragonfly, there's 185 poets in there, and then there's also a certain number of poems that each poet is represented by. The top 2 are women poets. Marlene Mountain and Eve Luckring actually came out on top. I was choosing them just by excellence, in my own personal taste, but today I think they're really worth reading. Those as well as, of course, Roberta, who's here. I mentioned already Sabine Miller, who's newer on the scene. And another woman poet I wanted to mention who's really interesting, Susan Diridoni. She's in San Francisco. Helen Buckingham has been writing quite a number of really interesting new haiku, new style, and also Michelle Tennyson. Those are all women haijin or haiku poets that I really respond to quite a lot. They're doing some new and interesting things, and I think just generally speaking, that's really changed. I mean, Roberta should comment on this too, because we've both been around a while, and boy, it was just super male dominated, up until recently. I think it's changing, but let's have Roberta. I hope she weighs in on this too.
Thanks, Rich. I think there is a kind of a gender issue in the haiku world. Alexis Rotella, very well-known haiku poet. As Rich mentioned, Marlene Mountain, also Jane Reichel. These women, along with Grace Cavallari, I asked them to do blurbs for my book, Deflection. One of the things that kind of gets to me with the global haiku movement is that there doesn't seem to be as many women blurbing the books, women haiku poets. It does seem, even by women who write the books, go to male poets to get their blurbs. That's one of my pet peeves, and I have a movement, I think, of one, which is myself trying to overcome that. There are so many really, really strong women poets that that write haiku that it would be really hard to name them. I mean, I think if you read the haiku journals, especially the Haiku Society of America, which has two women editors, Francine Banworth and Michelle Root Bernstein, there's a lot of good women poets that are being published in that journal, of course, as well as men. The haiku movement in the United States has kind of a sad history as far as women haiku poets. There's been, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6, 7 attempts to do a women's haiku anthology that has never gotten off the ground. I think I know 6 women that have worked on different variations of that project, different projects. They can't find a publisher. So that's unfortunate. And I don't think the bias is conscious. I think it's one of these things, and unconscious, kind of ingrained. Because when you see women poets going to people like Richard Gilbert or Jim Cation, I'm not sure he does blurbs anymore, or Lee Gerga, for their blurbs, instead of people like Alexis Rotella or Marlene Mountain, I think that tells you something about the whole kind of global haiku movement and the place of women in that structure.
Well, thanks, Roberta. It's interesting. None of the names that you mentioned, as far as I know, submitted to the issue, so I feel a little better. I think we have to, unless you have anything to add, Richard. I think we should wrap it up now. It's been over an hour.
All right. I'll just add one note. I wanted to mention Lauren Ford, Lorinford. Lauren Ford is a woman who is the founder and editor-in-chief of 100 Gourds. She's in Melbourne, Australia. And 2 other interesting women poets, Susan Constable and Rebecca Lilly, I didn't mention. So yeah, that's it. Just a brief comment there. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks, Richard, and thanks to both of you for a wonderful reading. I hope everybody watches and rewatches this, and thanks, of course, to Robert Peake for setting up this great venue, and for jumping in and bailing me out when I screwed it up. Let's see. Let's put up the flash screen here. Except I can't read it because it's inverted. But if you look at the screen, is the next reading, and it features, I can't read it, it's too small. Hey Robert, can you jump in and just read the poets for me?
Philip Freed and Sean Street.
Perfect, thank you. So that'll be
well done. Yes, Philip Freed and Sean Street, Sunday, 26th of April, 8 p.m. in the UK, 3 p.m. on the East Coast, noon on the West Coast, and that's hosted by Fjords, literary journal Fjords. So looking forward to that for next month.
Perfect. Well, thank you, and thanks to everybody for watching and listening, and we'll pick some winners for some free copies of Rattle too. Thanks a lot. Have a great time.
Thanks, everybody. It's wonderful.